In 1929, the stock market crashed after a record amount of stocks were traded. In 1929, just following the stock market crash, the Great Depression begins. 1930, Pluto was first discovered. In 1936, the Olympics are held in Berlin, the capital of the Nazi Army. Massive blimp Hindenburg crashes after lighting on fire in 1937. 1938 was when Superman first appears in comic books. In 1939, World War II begins as Hitler invades Poland. It's no surprise that the Great Depression was one of the worst times in American history. People went bankrupt, the stock market crashed, and a lot of people lost their jobs. Some even had to sell their own children to get around. There were also soup kitchens and other things to supply food. But, as signs such like these, many people couldn't find jobs, and it was an awful experience. To learn more about this topic of the Great Depression, I decided to interview my grandfather. He would provide good insight to see how the Depression was like firsthand.
Say something, I'm giving up on you.
I really didn't suffer from the Depression too much because my father was a prominent doctor and did very well. I did have a problem. He died in 1933, and the Depression didn't end until 1938 or 39. And but I didn't notice any. I had plenty to eat and stuff like that. They would pay him, but they'd pay him in canned pickles or preserved
chickens, or didn't?
Never chickens or anything like that. Usually the ones that didn't pay him just didn't pay him. I mean, he did a lot of pro bono work, but I remember my mother complaining of some people giving him, canned peas, jarred, mason, preserved, home stuff. There was no Medicare then. People had private insurance. I mean, there was insurance available, but you paid for it. But it wasn't provided by the government unless you were destitute. Then you could get welfare payments. And the doctors and hospitals did a lot of what's called pro bono work. The work that my father didn't get paid for, he wasn't expecting
You just
the
brushed it under
jars
the
of
rug
pickles
and
and
just
stuff.
figured,
People were just grateful, and they just gave him this stuff.
So he figured it evened out. The people that did pay, paid. The people that didn't. But that was sort of what happened back then.
It's just the way it was.
With everything, with banking and loans and all that kind of stuff?
You mean people not paying off their loans?
I mean, you just sort of had
that was something you were expected to do. And they wouldn't give you the loan if they didn't think you were pretty sure you couldn't pay it back.
What would they do about prescriptions, getting prescriptions and medicine if they were poor?
I don't know. I assume the pharmacies probably, depending on the circumstances, didn't make you pay for it. I mean, there was, as I said, it was part of the medical profession that the people that couldn't pay still got some care.
Right.
Granted, it was in emergency rooms and things like that, such as we've still got going on today.
Right, but now it's sort of overseen by the government, whereas then it was just goodwill. Because you lived in a community, your father probably knew the people that were falling on hard times.
Yeah.
So it's different, Brent. Like now people don't really live in communities and care for one another like they used to.
It's just, I still keep meeting people, or people whom I've known for a while will say, your father delivered me.
Yeah.
And I keep telling them, well, he made some mistakes. Days when people went bankrupt, they jumped out of windows.
What?
Yeah, they didn't. It was a terrible disgrace to go bankrupt. When I was growing up, downtown was a lot safer than it is now. And I used to ride my bike over to, I get my homework done, and I'd take off and go over to a movie. I remember going over to a movie on East Preston Street on the other side of Green Mountain Avenue, and you know what kind of area that is now.
Although millions of people did struggle throughout the Depression in the 1930s era, there was a real sense of unity and compassion and community, as I learned from my grandfather's interview. And even though he didn't struggle, it would just show throughout all of his stories, he would show. And without this, there would be nothing that would shape America to what it is today.